Hello and welcome to this episode of How to Be a Great GM. My name is Guy and today we're going to be looking at designing a dungeon but using a different technique to the one that we've used before on this channel. We're going to be using what we call a color zoning map to lay out our dungeon. Now, this is really only possible if you are designing your dungeon on PC. You could in theory do it on paper, but it would create a lot of repetition and a lot of redrawing of that map over and over again. So I'm going to show you how to use it, how to do it in Photoshop, but you could really use any program like GIMP, any of those free applications out there, because you're going to see that we're going to basically just be using layers to create different colors and things for our maps. Now, the reason why I wanted to show it to you here on How to Be a Great GM is because I think that map making is fairly critical when it comes to adventures that rely heavily on a map. So, for example, when we are looking at something like a heist or a prison break or an escape from a facility, having a map is absolutely vital. Not vital for you necessarily, but vital for the characters or for the players as well. So, what I'm going to be doing is I am actually running a prison break as we speak. Well, by the time this video comes out, the prison break will be well into progress, if not concluded already. So that I'm running on the Bacon RPG channel, which you can find in the links below. That's with my live play with my players. Now, they are trying to escape from a prison, and today, at the time of recording of this video anyway, is the first time that they actually get to grips with the prison and figure out how they're going to have to try and escape or what they're going to do about it. So I need to design a prison for that. So that's the context around which we're going to be working today. Now, let's get on with it. So I'm going to just activate my magic device here in the background. That's going to bring up Photoshop for us. And I'm just going to go File, New, and you can really choose the size that you want. I generally work to A3 size. That's just nice and big. I'm actually going to rotate this because I didn't do it when I created it, so I'm going to rotate it 90 degrees counterclockwise. It doesn't really matter. All right, so now we've got our background. Now, I'm in the way here, so I'm going to try and do something. And you've got to forgive me for this. I'm still learning. I'm going to squeeze myself back. There we go. So you can see my canvas nicely. All right, so we can go fit to screen, so get a nice big screen there. All right, good, that looks fine. Right, so we're going to create a new layer. I like to work in layers always. Now, the important thing to bear in mind is that when we're doing something like this, is we're working with colors. So colors are going to represent different things. And the important thing when designing a dungeon like this is that the colors are going to represent different perhaps stages, different levels, different difficulties that our players are going to have to go through. So we can really envisage what's going on in our game world, in our environment, and utilize that to maximum effect. Okay, so when we're talking prisons, we have to go back to our expectation. What do we expect from a prison? Now, we expect that there is a maximum security facility. We expect that there's a minimum security facility. There's got to be some kind of perimeter fence. There should be a sewer system or an air system that will lead to the surface that our players can use to escape. Now, that's the other very important thing to bear in mind, is that when we're talking about designing a place from which they must escape, there must be various avenues that they can escape from. All right, so that's what we're going to start off with, is we're going to start off here. I'm going to choose a light green. This is completely random. And I've already established a few things that my players know. So there's a tower. I'm just going to do that. I'm going to draw out a box and fill it with green. So there's a tower over there that has their airship. So that's their ultimate goal. So by the time they get to this point, they should have defeated most of the things in the prison, or they have just run and fled, in which case is going to be the big showdown that they're going to have to go through. All right, so to get to this tower, there's a corridor. Oops, wrong tool. There's a corridor. I'm just going to draw a corridor off of here. Now, I'm not concerned with measuring, with lengths, with anything along those lines, and I'm going to tell you why in a little bit. This is just the layout. This is the idea of this map. It's nothing important at the moment. It's just an idea. Now, this is one escape route that they can take. They can get back onto their airship and they can sail off. But I need to have another one. I need to have some other way that they can escape. So I'm going to come down here in the exact opposite. And there's a reason why I'm choosing the exact opposite. And the reason for that is because it causes the characters to have to decide which course of action they're going to take. So that's a nice moral dilemma that they're going to have to face. All right, great. So now I'm going to fill in that just so that we've got corridors. It's a prison. We expect corridors with lockable doors. We expect that kind of thing. All right. So then in the prison itself, I'm using the center of my page to represent that prison. We're going to have what we would call, let's say, for example, the normal operational facilities. So I'm going to bring this out and I'm going to make this, say, I don't know, let's make it more of a bluish color. So these are going to be things like medical facilities, the barracks of the guards, things that won't have a huge amount of impact in terms of the narrative. They're there really as set decorations to make this place feel more like an operational prison than just a random map that we've generated. So we're going to have a block over there, and then because we want to challenge ourselves, we want to inspire ourselves, we're going to have a block out here. Now, whether this is attached to the main facility or not, I don't know yet. I don't know what's in that block. I don't know yet either. I'm letting this inspire me. And again, I'm trying to position things on opposite sides to one another. So again, we're forcing that kind of decision making that the players are going to enjoy going through as they go, oh, well, we could go to the medical bay, but there's a medical bay over there, or we could go over there. And over there is a problem because we need to fight through a pit of doom or something. Whatever. But it gives them those nice, interesting decisions that they're going to have to make. All right, so those are our two sort of admin-y blocks. We're then going to, obviously, we're going to need some kind of prison. So the prison itself, I'm going to say, is going to have this defensive barrier. Who knows what it is? I don't know what it is. We haven't figured that part out yet. But it's going to be something difficult. Call it a wall, call it whatever you like. It's a barrier. Then within this, we're going to have, obviously, within that, we're going to have this block here. And you're going to see how this translates in a little bit. So we've got this block over here. And let's say that this is minimum security. Right, we've got a block there. And then we're going to come in and we've got our maximum security, which is generally always in the center of the map or the zone, whatever you want to term it. So this is our maximum security here. Great stuff. Lovely. So we've got some options here. We've got some nice sort of fillers. We've got some nice space. Purple is where there's going to be lots of cells. Red is where there's only a few cells that are absolutely critical. Then because of the nature of this map, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to add in another purple block over here, just so that we've got the red block is sort of flanked, if you like, by these two hard choices. So now our players, and this really doesn't look like a map, does it? It does not look like a fantasy map at all, but we're getting there. We're absolutely getting there. All right, so that's the idea. Now I want my players to be able to get to certain key locations which are going to give them information. It's going to give them an idea of what's going on. So I'm going to put this block over here. So if they get here, they can see what's going on in this. Maybe this is a tower, something along those lines. So yes, absolutely great, fantastic. We'll take that, we'll use that as we need to. All right, so that's fantastic. I think we've got most of the components that we're going to need. I don't think there's anything here that's particularly missing. So now we're ready to go into our next step. And our next step is actually going to help you to create something much more interesting. Now, what I'm going to do here, I'm going to press Control J for those of you using Photoshop to just duplicate my layer. I'm going to hide the original layer here. I don't know if you can see my little cursor just above my head here. So I'm working with a copy. And with this copy, I'm going to shrink it back. If you're using something else, I'm not sure exactly what you can use to make a duplicate copy, but all we're doing is we're shrinking this back so that we can then come here and recreate our prison, if you like. So green is going to be a nice tall tower because we need it to be. Okay, so that's great. Then we've got that sort of light greenish color, which runs for about there. I'm actually doing this incorrectly, so we're going to have to go layering here. So we've got our red tower. Now, do we want our tower to be very high or very low? That's an interesting question. I think this should be a submerged tower. So we're going to put our red down low down there. Okay, and all I'm doing here is I'm creating a height map so we can get to see how many layers we think we're going to need. We've then got our blue block, which starts from about here. Our blue block doesn't necessarily have to go underground. Maybe what we do is we're going to drop it one layer, one level if you like, and then we're going to fill it in. Okay, and then finally we've got our purple blocks, which I think for sake of drama can actually be a little bit higher up if we like. Something like this. And I'm just copying the original colors that I used. So we've got something like that. Then we've got this light green box here, which is the administration facility. So let's do this, so that we know that there is a sneaky way that we can actually, let's do it like this, because it doesn't extend the whole way, does it? It doesn't have to be accurate. Again, I'm being too pedantic here. Oops, wrong button. So there we go. I'm going to fill that in. So we get a sense that we could go from the admin into the into the into the, oh, I'm losing my words now. I'm trying to think too much. Into the maximum security facility. We certainly could if we wanted to. I'm not sure if we want them to or not. All right, so let's just make sure we press the right button here. Okay, great. So there's an idea of our prison facility. It's quite interesting. It's quite cool. And what it's done is it's inspired me as well to think about this prison from a slightly different way. So I can now see that if I'm going to be putting down guards and things, not a lot in the green corridor, some in this sort of turquoisey patch, and then quite a few in the blue patch, more in the purple patch, and then the most in the red patch. And of course these green patches allow our players to escape. So if they can get to any of those points, that's absolutely fine. That's fantastic. All right, so that's how you do a color map. Now, how does this then translate? Well, this is now our vertical, all right? So that's absolutely fine. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put a line in here so that we know that this is above and below ground. All right, so there's our prison facility. And already, if you're like me, I have an idea that what if we had a, and I'm gonna just make a new layer here so I don't muck up the drawing for later. But what if we had a rope bridge or a swing bridge that yeah, that'll do. We had a swing bridge that went from the one tower to the other like that. I mean, that's very professional, isn't it? What if we had this rope bridge that did that? So that the wardens can walk across and see what's going on. I think we'll do a join here as well. This makes this much more interesting, especially if the red is sunken into the ground. And what if the red had a hole in the middle of it? So it's this, it's a, yeah, dead space. I quite like that idea. So I'm going to come here. I'm going to delete that, right? So we get this idea that there's this tube-like corridor type thing. I really like that idea. Okay, so this is now our color map. We're now done. We could run the adventure with this as it is. It's not particularly inspiring, and if you want to go specific door-to-door type of action, this is absolutely the way that you could do it. Well, this is the start of how you could do it. If you want to have absolutely every single room planned out in your prison, in your dungeon, then you would need to go into more detail, obviously. And the way that you would do that is you now take this map and then you do an overlay of it. So we can already see that this dungeon is going to be and I'm just sort of going with this idea here of this black bar representing layers or levels. We can say that either it's a massive facility or it's not such a big facility. So I'm going to go with that it's a massive facility. We've got multiple floors here, which we can correct for if necessary, in terms of scaling and all that kind of stuff. Again, that's not important. So I've got several layers up, so this gives me a sense of height, and I've got at least 3 layers down. So that's my interesting facility. That's an idea on this. I'm going to drop these down, and then I'm just going to drop the opacity a little bit so we can see what's going on. So this is an idea of how we then can break it down. We go, okay, well, do I need to draw a map for every single level? Do I need every single level plotted out? And generally speaking, unless you are doing a dungeon crawl, you don't. Generally speaking, you don't. You need maybe the main level, which is where the characters arguably will spend quite a bit of time, and then you maybe need some key or very specific levels worked out. So in the case of this dungeon map, I wouldn't plot out the corridor or the central towers, either of these 2 towers. We know that they're towers. We know that they are square, that they have staircases or an elevator, in my case, going from the top to the bottom. And that's it. We don't need to plot all of that out. This admin block that we've now got, do we need to draw out the infirmary, the barracks? No, but we do need to know what's in there. We do need to know what's in there. So we can take this now, and then we can break this down if we really wanted to. If we really felt that we needed to, we can break this down into, let's say, different colors. And again, it's about remembering what these colors actually mean, because that can be a problem. So we can, oops, doesn't like that. Why didn't you like that? I need a layer. So there's the infirmary. Here's some barracks, because that's what you need in a prison. Let's do some barracks quickly. And then we need the actual warden's office. Again, running off of what does one expect from a prison? Well, one expects a warden's office where the prisoners can get taken and chastised and processed as well. We could have a little processing room in there that then leads into this blue compound. The blue compound, well, what we could do if we really wanted to is we have this outside corridor, and then we've got, say, some basic holding cells. And again, this is what I like about these color maps, is that we've got these basic holding cells there and running there. Right, great stuff. And running along here, well, up to there, let's say. So the idea, and this is not a new idea. This has come from castle design long ago. And this also helps, as if you look at actual castle designs, you're going to look at real world castles, real world prison facilities, real world structures and things. This does help you, or imagination anyway, in terms of coming up with options, is to then say, all right, so we've got these holding cells which are for perhaps temporary inmates, so for inmates that are not here for very long, therefore inmates that are still being processed, if there's a process backlog, so there's this kind of holding cell. Then we need to have an eating space, somewhere where the inmates all get together and consume food. So that's going to be here. We're going to have this kitchen canteen facility. And again, do I really need to map out all the different things that would be in there? So you'd obviously have a scullery, you'd have kitchen facilities, you'd also have, just looking at our map here, because we've got multiple levels, the one level might be the kitchens, or where the food is prepared. The second level might be where the laundry services are done. Or maybe what we do is we do that actually on the top level. The laundry is done in the top level, and there's an open air space where that top level can be used for whatever for drying and that sort of thing. So maybe we do that. Then, or the second level and the third level and so on. So you really can now just add in stuff as you go along, and as your players come across stuff, as they suggest stuff as well. I'm very much about adding stuff to the structure on the fly. On this side, those levels there are perhaps larger holding cells for larger creatures. If you're running a fantasy game, remember, not all cells need to accommodate a 6-foot tall person. Sometimes they need to accommodate a 60-foot monster, perhaps, if that's your kind of world. So we've got this block here, and on the top of this one, I'm going to put a garden, so the inmates can get up onto the roof and they can do some gardening. That allows them, if they're going to dig a tunnel to escape, they can disperse the sand up here. Remember, again, we've got to remember how to keep to allow our players to escape. We'll also put the bath facilities here. That's another thing that one expects from a prison, is the shower facilities. That's another way to break out, is that there's a sewer system on this side of the prison that leads out to the outside of the facility, and if they can just get through that, then they're okay. So our guards have now got a nice long patrol route to walk around. They've got this inner ring here of cells with difficult people. Then of course they've got these purple cells, which are going to be the most difficult to escape from. And the reason why is because the prison built cells around the cells. So you can break out of your cell, but you're just going to break into another one. You're not actually going to get out. So again, though, I'm not prescribing specific rooms. And that, I think, is the important thing. You know, we often look at it and we go, we don't have a lot of time to plan out these complicated maps, to work out these complicated things. But if you look at it, it's really only taken me about 21 minutes to do this. And a lot of that time has actually been explaining things, explaining how we get to where we get to, and that sort of thing. So there is that aspect to it as well. Now, if you look at this, so this is a really quick way of doing a dungeon that you don't have to focus too much on. Now, if you look at it, if you really want to add in more detail as we go, our shipmates, our people arrive here. They walk down this long corridor that has access points to the infirmary, to the barracks, to the ward office, to the processing room. They then get into the super security type facility, which then gives them access into the maximum security. Now, this isn't a doorway here. This could very well be a very thin corridor that leads directly to maximum security. And off of it branches more corridors that lead to these extra purple cells on either side. This is just an idea. Now, if I really wanted to, I could then say, right, so choke points, which I'm going to do in the most hideous color I can. So let's go with chartreuse. We'll do that. And so we've got a choke point there. Whether it's a trap, it could be a trap, quite possibly. I quite like the idea of it being a trap. So we're going to put traps. Look at that color contrast. I hope you can see it in the video. So we've got trap doors sort of everywhere. Let's say that's a corridor there. That's a corridor there. So they'll have maybe a trap on either side of these facilities. Again, I'm also thinking in terms of fun narrative idea, is that these are the principal traps that they have to worry about and that they have to overcome, whether it's bars or magic portals, however you want to work it in your prison. But that's it. Now we're done. As far as I'm concerned, we really are done. We don't have to go much further than that. We need to think about how do they move from levels up and down. Are there hard staircases in the corners? Are there staircases in the middle? Is there one staircase? Are there multiple staircases? I would always advise that there are at least 3 different ways of moving from one level to the next. So it could be a staircase, it could be an elevator, and it could be a ladder that has been put into place to allow for movement from one area to the other. That really helps. So in example of moving around a contained facility, if we look at science fiction, if you look at Star Trek has got these access corridors that run parallel to their normal corridors. Well, at least that's what they seem to do, but they don't really. They work at the speed of plot in this case, because sometimes there's access corridors that go everywhere on the ship or on the space station. And other times, there isn't an access corridor that would go to that very vital system. Why? Well, because if they did, then the plot would fall down. So here here is your opportunity not to have to spend days crafting a dungeon map. You don't have to go and tattoo it on some hunk's body. You can just use color maps and generate these very interesting maps on the fly, but you know where you're going. You know what your rough outline is. You know where your rough spacing is, and then that'll allow you to add as you go. And to listen to what your players are saying. That for me is the most critical part, is as they're walking down a corridor, if they're busy talking about, oh, I hope that we don't come across a this or a that, or you then know, right, well, they're going down that, into that color, they're going into that space. So if they go into that, say, that dark purple space up here, the sort of plum color, I know that those are big prison cells at the lower levels, and at the upper level it's a garden. So they're thinking about big monsters. They're in the lower levels because that's kind of where we are on the map. Perfect. I am going to now have a giant creature burst out of its cell as they come around the corner. Why? Because that's what they're expecting, and so let's give it to them. But maybe that creature's a pacifist. Maybe it's one of those misunderstood creatures that doesn't know how to communicate, and it's just angry or it's frightened. Or perhaps, and this is something that was even more interesting, is that it bursts out full of rage and terror, and it's trying to run away from its cellmate, which is the exact opposite. It's a little 2-foot-high gremlin with spikes everywhere that appears innocuous until, of course, there is the player interaction, and then it turns into this absolute nightmare. So this is all that I've done. I'm now done prepping for my dungeon, for my prison escape. If you want to have a look at how that played out, go and watch season 5 of The Adventures of the Windswift. You'll see the thumbnails are labeled quite clearly season 5. If you started episode 1 of season 5, that's where I launch into this, and then you can see how this map plays out for that. Anyway, I hope that this has been useful in terms of giving you perhaps an alternative method on how... I'm just going to make myself bigger again. Okay, so I hope this has given you an alternative method on how to look at designing dungeons. Yes, there is definitely not that feeling of this well-drawn, complicated dungeon and secret doors and things you're going to have to create on the fly. And if you need to, you can map this out as you go, if you really feel that the players are going to be going to that level of detail. And if they are, that's fantastic. So you also have to judge on the type of players that you're playing with. In my online game, the players don't necessarily map out the route that they take, because they know in my games they don't really have to worry too much about that. It's more about the experience of being in that space more than anything else. So until next time, I do wish you the happiest and most productive of map making, whether it's meticulously drawing it out by hand or using color blocks as an alternative way to plot out your dungeon. Until next time, happy gaming.